Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about the document analysis. Ooh, big phrase. It has to do with part of the SOL that you're going to have to understand is being able to read and analyze a document. You know, this is an example of such a document. If you look real close, it's a map of the continent of France. Not France, Europe. Boom. So when we look at the continent of Europe, you can see that a map is going to show you all kinds of stuff. It's going to show you the oceans, it's going to show you the seas, it's going to show you the names of each and every one of the countries. But obviously, if you look real closely, you can see. I mean, you can see Portugal. That's right there, and that looks right. But there's a couple of things that you need to look at that's not exactly modernized. So, let's say, for instance, Castville right here it's Spain. All right, but it's not going to be named Spain just yet because guess what? It's in 1471. All right, and so when you look at all of the aspects of a map, you can look and see. But make sure you look at the title before you answer any one of the questions. All right, so you're looking for the location of printing presses in 1471. All right, so two things you need to know. First of all, that it's a map of the printing press. All right, and you're looking at 1471. We're not looking at 1900, which is the 20th century. You're not looking at modern day Europe. You're looking at a map in 1471. Now, if you look at it again, and you look at the first question, it says how many printing presses were in Europe in 1471. Now, this is kind of a vague look at some of the the printing presses that were around. So if you look at the location of printing press, it's got a little dot next to it. All right, of course, in this area is called the key of a map. So you're going to look around and you're going to see how many dots there are in each one. All right, in each one of the areas of Europe. So it says how many printing presses were in Europe in 1471. You can see, let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, right around 16 or so printing presses in 1471. Now, again, I'm guessing for the sake of this lesson. But let's take a look about how many printing presses were in Europe in 1500. You can take a look, and you can see that in 1471, all right, there were about 16 or so, but it doesn't say where in 1500 how many were in Europe. But if you scroll down, you can look at the other one, the other map that's right here, and that would be the location of printing presses in 1500. Now take a look at this map in 1471. All right, location of printing presses. You see about 15 or 16 there. Look down to the second map in 1500. Now, you can kind of take a guess in your head, what's the difference between this map and this map? Well, a couple of things. One, it's in 1500, as you can see. All right, location of printing presses, obviously it's recognized by that black dot. Look at how many black dots are on the map of Europe. So what can you tell me first, just your first impression about your looking at these two maps? Were there more printing presses in 1471 or were there more printing presses in 1500? And of course, you can't answer that question because obviously I'm not really here. I'm not live at the moment. All right, but think about that in your head. So, about how many printing presses were in Europe in 1500? You can say, just for sake of argument, that there's a lot more based on this particular map. Now, the next question asks, what inference can you make about the change in the price of books in Europe between 1471 and 1500? Explain your thinking. Now, an inference is just a guess, like we just talked about. So an inference you can make about this particular map, all right, of these two maps is, first of all, you look at the dots, and there's more dots in 1500 than there was in 1471, which gives you an indication, all right, that when we looked at the printing press, all right, which was invented by who? I'll stop there for a second and let you think to yourself, who invented the printing press? All right, 3, 2, 1. Okay, that would be Gutenberg who invented the printing press. Okay, the effect that Gutenberg's printing press had, all right, on the world, would you say made a big impact or a little impact between 1471 and 1500. Obviously, the more printing presses you have, the more print you can make. The more print you can make, the more Bibles were created. The more Bibles that were created, what happens? The more people read, the more educated people became. Pretty cool, huh? All right, so an inference that you can make about the change, all right, now it says you can make about the change in the price of books in Europe between 1471 and 1500. Explain your thinking. Now it says price of books. Obviously, we're not going to know American money. We're not talking about American money back in the day. All right, but we can take a look and say, you know what? Because there are more books that are printed, the higher demand of that is there. So you could probably say between 1471 and 1500, the demand goes up, the supplies goes up, the price relatively stays the same, or it could actually go down based on what you're talking about. So the change in the price of books would either fall or increase based on that demand. Well, when you have more printing presses, the more that is available, the less price a book is going to be. So guess what? Hey. All right, so the more the price goes up, the better off the middle class is going to be. All right, so now we can look at the next question and ask, what can you make about the change in literacy in Europe between 1471 and 1500? Explain your thinking. Now, when you're looking at this particular map, you're looking at 1500. Now, ask yourself, were there educated people in this particular time period? A majority of people in that back in the day were taught by priests, were taught by elders, all right? And the main book of the time was, wait for it, the Bible. So when we talk about this particular topic, the inference that you can make about the change in literacy is that the more books that were read, the more people were able to read and educate themselves. The more Bibles that were printed, the more educated people became. And guess what, folks? The more educated people became, the more people started to question the Catholic Church, because their interpretation was all based on what? Priests' ability to teach and so on. So when you look at the interpretation of the Bible, all right, people are now able to interpret it for themselves rather than take it on the word of a priest. So guess what happened to people's thinking as a result of reading the Bible? You guessed it, revolution. And when they questioned God, a whole lot of control was lost by the kings. So keep that in mind. Now, what difference can you make about the change in people's interest in geography at the time? Well, people wound up moving to where the books were, all right, moving to where the opportunities were. So they moved to the areas of Italy and in the parts of Europe, all right? The power of the Pope, guess what, kids? When you look at the power of the Pope, people started to interpret the Bible for themselves. So what happened to the control of the Catholic Church as a result? Well, in my estimation, the more books you have, the more education you have, the more questions are out there, the impact of the Catholic Church in terms of power and control, I would say would go down as a result. But you do that thinking for yourself. All right? So when we talk about those ideas, when we talk about the power of the Pope, guys, you can just see by the power of the printing press, people started to be able to question the Bible for themselves and to interpret it for themselves in their own lives. People started to question, and guess what? Religions changed.
No one.
Thanks for your time.
Circles the wagon.
And no one circles the
Like the
wagons
Buffalo
like the
Bills.
Buffalo Bills. You guessed it. Peace.